So I just wanted to say thank you all for being here as a part of our keynote lecture series for the Amelia Earhart Summit. Um, I am the Vice President of Women in Aerospace here at Purdue. And just a heads up to everyone, we are recording this lecture. And so just please don't unmute yourself and keep your video off. And please ask any questions in the chat box. And we'll work through them throughout the lecture and answer any other ones at the end. So a little bit about the Amelia Earhart Summit. Women in Aerospace, graduate women's gatherings, and the School of AAE started Amelia Earhart Summit in 2008. And this year, the purpose of Amelia Earhart Summit is to empower students by hosting events that focus on diverse career paths and experiences from prominent members of the aerospace community. So thanks to our lecturer for being here today. Dr. Jacqueline Gatson is the Associate Director of Purdue University's Minority Engineering Program. She has over a decade of experience in higher education, specializing in university and industry engagement, STEM programs, and strategic partnerships. Since joining a minority engineering program staff in 2019, she has been an integral leader in core operational areas, including student engagement, outreach, industry management, engagement, program management, and curriculum design and introduction. She's the creator of Purdue Engineering We Support Black Engineers campaign and is currently working on curriculum and training design for the Ideal Committee Diversity Initiative. And I will now hand it off to Dr. Gatson. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you that decided to be here this evening. I know you could be anywhere, but I'm honored that you took time out of your busy schedule to join me in this conversation this evening. And so we'll just jump right into it. And I am going to share my screen so that I can pull up my PowerPoint here. And can anyone see it? I want to make sure.
Yep, we got it.
Okay, perfect. And I'm switching to presentation mode, which looks like it's taking a while to do. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. So I want to start off with a brief introduction of who I am. I'm a native of Louisiana, a very small town called Waterproof, Louisiana. And trust me, it's okay if you laugh. I've gotten a lot of laughs over my lifetime about where I'm from. But I'm very excited to share with you a little bit about my journey and how I ended up here at Purdue. So I'm a graduate of Grambling State University, which is in Grambling, Louisiana, and Kansas State University, a two-time grad there where I did my master's and my doctoral work in education, higher education specifically, and focused my research in engineering and industry engagement. And now I'm at Purdue. I've been here about 2 years now and very happy to be a part of the engineering community in the minority engineering program. So lastly, what I want to share is my family. And so this is my family. This is my husband, Brandon. This is my son, Cooper. This is our youngest son, Evan. And we are currently expecting a new baby girl, breaking up this boy ratio here in July. So very, very excited about that as well. if it'll move here. So I want to start off talking about the Minority Engineering Program, but just to kind of give you some idea of what we'll be doing this evening, I will be talking a little bit about MEP, what MEP is and what we do here at the university. I will share some stats as it relates to engineering numbers, especially in the underrepresented minority categories. And I must forewarn you, I have quite a few slides on that, so I'll try to go through those numbers quickly. And then the bulk of the evening, I would love for us to have an opportunity to have cultural conversations centered around diversity, and specifically the We Support Black Engineers campaign. And I've invited some students that have participated in that campaign to share their insight, and I will be sharing some video clips from that as well for us to have further conversation about. So at the Minority Engineering Program, we are responsible for the recruitment, retention, graduation, enrollment of underrepresented populations. And we have a team of people that do that. And let's see, my slide is not advancing here for some reason. Here we go. Can you see this? This is our core staff and support group. So we're led by our director, Virginia Womack, and this is our team of core staff, Derek Williams, who is our K-12 undergraduate program administrator, Dr. Swally, who's our recruitment and retention analyst, Mary Kenner, our operations and finance coordinator, Heather Core, our assistant director of communications, Tamara Markey, our AB7G, which is an outreach program, national replication director, our recent grad, who is a grad of the Aeroastro program, Bonnie Prado-Pino, and Vivek Mudharan, who is one of our MEP graduate assistants. So as I kind of mentioned before, one of our main goals is to, advance the mission of engineering through learning, discovery, and engagement. And we do that through outreach, recruitment, retention, and graduation of historically underrepresented populations. So a lot of people wonder, what are URMs? What does that mean? And what that means is that it's students or people, population that categorize as African American, Latino, Hispanic American, Native American, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander students. And so, as I mentioned, these are our 5 core metrics. And here are some of the programs and services that we do at MEP. So in pre-college, we do our Algebra by 7th grade program, which is right now locally, and we're expanding regionally with hopes to expand nationally. It's a math retention-based program. Pre-COVID, we're doing a lot of in-person middle and high school visits, and we're exploring opportunities to do more of those virtually as schools allow. Some of our signature programs happen in the summer, where we have a lot of summer camps, and we did, surprisingly, all of those camps virtually last year in 2020, but most of the time they're residential. The Sioux camp is for our rising 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. We have a 9th and 10th grade camp called Preface. MITE is our camp that is targeting incoming high school seniors. And then we also have the Engineering Academic Boot Camp, which is situated for incoming Purdue freshmen who are either in the College of Engineering, or they may be exploratory students who are interested in engineering as well. On the undergraduate side, we have our Engineering 180 class, which is a seminar class. We do the MEP networking reception, which is actually a part of an opportunity for grad and undergraduate students. It's usually before industrial roundtable. We have different mentoring programs. We have our Academic Success Center, which offers free tutoring. We also engage in different corporate mentoring programs. We have a Pathway to Graduate School course for undergrads. And we also have different learning communities and different student organization advising that we take a big role in. For our graduate side, we offer professional development sessions, professional development funding for conferences and things of that nature. We establish mentoring connections, events and socials, the MEP community, conference support, employment opportunities such as graduate assistantships and other graduate positions with us throughout the year, outreach opportunities, and writing retreats. And I must give a disclaimer that in this COVID nature, we've been pretty challenged in terms of what we can do, because a lot of these events have to be virtual. And as you all know, if you're students on the call, that there's a virtual fatigue. And our students really enjoy community and socializing. And so we're still trying to find that balance of how to provide some of these services to our students in this time that we're experiencing. So let's jump into the diversity in numbers. And first, I want to start with our numbers here at Purdue. And I will say that for sake of time, for those of you that have in-depth questions about the numbers that you're seeing, I will be happy to stay even after the presentation if there's other questions that come up. But I want to give you a picture of why what we do at NEP is so important, and why it's so important to get students into the pipeline for engineering, and not just in the pipeline, but to successfully matriculate and graduate. So if we look at the total enrollment per fall 2020, we see that the college has a total enrollment this year of 13,577 students. And out of those, 3,774 of them are grad students. For female total enrollment, we're looking at 3,351 students across the board. For male, we're looking at 10,000, a little over 10,000. And for URM, that number drops drastically to a little over 1,100 students. And as you can see, historically, those numbers have not been high. And ideally, those numbers are nowhere near where we want them to be. And so this is where NEP focuses a lot of our efforts, time, and initiatives to make sure that we can bring students of color to Purdue. And we're working against several challenges to be able to do that. But that is what we, are primarily tasked with. If you look at the URM female total enrollment, that number goes down even more to 329 students total. And you can see back in even fall of 2008, that number total was 98. If you look at the male URM total enrollment, we're looking at 848 students total across both undergraduate and grad. For students that are 2 or more races, this breakdown kind of shows by ethnicity. We currently have 196 students across both grad and undergrad. American Indian or Alaska Native, we have 12, which we are definitely trying to encourage more students of that descent to come, as well as our Native American and Pacific Islander population, which right now is 10. Our African American population for this year is categorized at 244, with 175 students being undergrad, 69 being grad. And if we look at our Hispanic numbers, we see a slight increase to 712 students, which is up from the 599 we experienced fall of 2019. And again, these are both a combination of grad and undergrad. And if you look at the chart, it'll show the breakdown of the two. So when we look across majors, this kind of gives you a picture of where the students are and what colleges. And this chart doesn't reflect first year engineering, which is where all students are in the same category until they codo into their major. But this gives you an idea of the reports we have so far of where students are across the board. And so in the Aeronautics and Astronautics school, you can see that we're looking at an undergrad total of 74 students across all of the URM populations. Right now, our lowest population is housed within the School of Nuclear Engineering, which is 7. And across engineering education is where we find most students that may be in a a combination of multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and there may be a few FYE numbers in here, but I'm not 100% certain, so I do apologize for that. Next, after that, we are looking at mechanical, which has 128 students, and then electrical and computer, which has 113. And as you look at this chart, you can kind of see how those numbers have progressed or decreased over the past few years from fall of 2016. So now that you have kind of a quick picture of what our numbers look like here at Purdue, let's take a quick journey through the US snapshot of what this looks like in comparison. So for undergraduate students, and I want to start with the URM population, according to Engineering by the Numbers report, which is compiled by ASEE, we are seeing that from 2011 to 2019, which is the latest version of this report, that there was a slight increase in Hispanic graduates from 8.5% to 11.9%. However, and unfortunately, we're seeing that from 2011 to 2019, there hasn't been any significant growth for the African American population. It was 4.2 in 2011, and it's 4.3, and it was 4.3 in 2019. And also, there's a steady decline in the American Indian Alaskan Native population from 0.5% in 2011 to 0.3% in 2019. If you look across the country as a whole, I thought this might be a good snapshot for you to get an idea of, is this chart shows engineering undergraduate enrollment based on fall 2019 for race, ethnicity, and gender. And so if you look at all the different categories, it also includes non-resident students as well. And it also captures some unknown demographics too. So you can see the breakdown between male and female across all ethnic groups. And you can see a total male and a total female count there at the bottom. And you will see that total male count is over 460,000, and total female count is just shy of 147,000 across the board. If we look at bachelor's degrees awarded across the country, this gives you an idea of where the numbers reside in each discipline. And in aerospace, we see that according to the 2019 report, 4,533 degrees had been issued. If we look at these numbers by underrepresented populations, we instantly see a significant dip. And that dip is very, very indicative of what we're seeing at the university level as well across the country. If we take a focus on aerospace, we're seeing that from the 2019 report, 619 URM students received bachelor's degrees. If we go a little step further and look at women, this chart shows the percentage of bachelor's degrees awarded to women. And in aerospace, we see that that is 14%. And I also wanted us to take a look at the institutions that are awarding the highest number of engineering degrees. So that you can see that Purdue is represented. We're number 3 with having awarded 2,339 engineering degrees as of 2019. However, if we look across this from a URM perspective, we see that, again, the percentages are very shockingly low for our BIPOC population. And so we can see that based on the fact that the figure I gave earlier, as where it mentioned, the needle hasn't moved much for African Americans. Actually, it took a dip in 2014 to 3.5% and 3.9% in 2016. We're we're really not increasing much. And again, this chart is what drives my team on a regular basis to figure out how we can affect these numbers in a very positive light. This also gives you an idea of bachelor's degrees awarded based on race, gender, and ethnicity. The first chart that was similar showed enrollment. And then I wanted you to have a look at which institutions are noted for degrees awarded for underrepresented minorities. This chart shows the top universities that award to African Americans. And this one shows the top institutions that award bachelor's degrees to Hispanic students. And when we look at this information, we are trying to determine, you know, what are some of the anecdotal things we can take away from this that the data is telling us, as well as some of the factual things. You know, is it a matter of location? Location does play a big role. Is it a matter of funding? Funding plays a huge role. Is it a matter of community and, you know, how do students feel? What is the different recruitment strategy that is being, you know, utilized at each institution? Those are things that we're constantly looking at and how we can compete. Because as you all know, students that can get into Purdue University can get into almost anywhere. And so if we're competing with the best students in the country and the best students if we're competing for the best students in the country and the best students in the world, then yes, we have some deep competition. And a lot of that anecdotally lands with funding, because some of our other competitors are able to offer full scholarships that really attract our URM population. I also wanted to show this slide just so you can get an idea of the top institutions that are awarding aerospace degrees, and Purdue is listed as number 4, and this is for bachelor's degrees specifically. And doctoral students. So this will show you master's student enrollment across the country, broken into race, ethnicity, and gender. And then this slide will show master's degrees awarded by discipline. And this is across the board, not just URM population. And so you will see that across the board, 1,598 degrees are awarded in aerospace. Let's see, I want to make sure I didn't advance too far. Yes, okay, I'm here. So this gives you a breakdown for URMs by engineering disciplines for master's degrees. And remember that number before was across all ethnicities, over 1,500. If you look at the number of students receiving a master's degree in aerospace that are of the URM population, that number drops to 139. This slide shows master's degrees awarded by race, gender, and ethnicity, which is different from the previous slide, which shows master's degree enrollment by race, gender, and ethnicity. And this slide shows top institutions for master's degrees awarded to underrepresented minorities. And again, we're working very hard to see how can we be a part of this top 20 list across the board, across all disciplines. In the doctoral sector, we're looking at a chart that represents enrollment, again, by race, ethnicity, and gender. So you have an idea of that. And what we're seeing from 2019, if you take a look at the Black or African American male and female students kind of towards the second section, and Hispanic female and male at the bottom and top half of the first two sections, you'll see what those numbers are. Hispanic male is 1,800, Hispanic female is 839, Black or African American male is 850, Black or African American female is 509. And then it also goes into American Indian, which you see is drastically lower, and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. It covers both of those categories as well. This slide shows doctoral degrees awarded. And you might be like, why are we looking at all of this? But from our perspective, we look at the big picture, the whole picture, because as it relates to representation in engineering, not just from a student perspective, but we have to look at who's graduating with doctoral degrees and master's degrees that we could potentially recruit for doctoral degrees to add to the pipeline of potential faculty. And I have a couple of slides that shows those numbers as well. This slide breaks down even further doctoral degrees awarded to underrepresented minorities by discipline. And as you can see in 2019, that number was 18 in aerospace. And then this is a breakdown of degrees awarded by race, ethnicity, and gender a little further across all disciplines. So as I mentioned, holistically, we look at all of this data because we are trying to impact the pipeline from grade K in kindergarten all the way through PhD. And so we're looking at all of this data to be able to develop programs, initiatives, partnerships, you name it, to make sure that we are tapping into the pipeline and contributing to the pipeline at multiple levels. So I wanted to show you these two slides really quick as it relates to the top institutions for underrepresented minorities, tenure and tenure track. So if any of you are on the call interested in going into the academy, you'll have an idea of what institutions are currently listed as being some of the top and how many. And the numbers are still not that high, especially when you consider the student population of the school. And so as you can see, Purdue is ranked number 6 in a tie with Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. But out of 30, we still have 13,000 students. And so when looking at that, depending on your perspective, we still have a ways to go. And while MEP primarily contributes to student development, we are constantly making connections to help get faculty of color here too. If you look at the top institutions with the highest number of female tenured and tenure track faculty, you would see that Purdue ranks 7 at 73, which is, kind of comparable to some of our peers. But again, depending on your perspective, we're looking at that number across the board as it relates to our student population as well. So let's talk briefly about College of Engineering diversity initiatives. And these are in no way all of the initiatives. So I'm going to tell you about the ones that either I interface with or work the most with. But some of the programs and orgs in the College of Engineering, as I mentioned, the Minority Engineering Program, we have our Women in Engineering Program, Global Engineering, we have several learning communities with a diversity focus. Some of the signature programs related to recruitment of diverse students is MEP Promise and MEP Preview. We also have several engineering student organizations that were founded to help support underrepresented minorities in their respective demographic. We also, college-wide, we have an assistant dean of diversity and inclusion. The college has the Ideal Committee, which was mentioned earlier, and I'll talk a little bit more about. There is a lot of cross-college collaboration that is happening in MEP. We work a lot across all of the different schools to help with diversity initiatives, outreach, recruitment efforts, whether that be for students, staff, or faculty. Recruitment and retention is happening everywhere in the colleges, in the schools, as well as with MEP. We do a lot of that, but we work in tandem with our admissions team, with the Office of Future Engineers, and with the different schools to help us recruit students. There's also a lot of work happening with MSI partnerships, and MSI stands for Minority Serving Institutions. So that could be HBCUs, which are historically Black colleges or universities, could be HSIs, which are Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges, things of that nature. And so we are working very diligently to identify additional HBCUs or other MSI institutions that we can develop partnerships with. We have several partnerships with Morgan State University, and we're working to expand into other geographic regions and territories as well, to get a wide variety of the students to know that Purdue is wanting to partner and engage, and we want to actively recruit at those institutions. We're also doing a lot of different diversity campaigns, and one of which we'll get into very shortly is the We Support Black Engineers campaign. Training wise, we are, and I am working very closely with the college and Dr. Alexenko, who I believe is on the call, on ideal training and curriculum. And in that, what we're doing is developing training opportunities for faculty and staff, and also we're expanding our reach to students. And some of the topics that I'm working to develop curriculum on revolve around cultural identity, stereotype threat, bias, microaggressions, many, many more. And we are tailoring those workshops to the specific groups so that we can best educate and empower them in whatever their goals or whatever their work may be with students. And we're seeing some serious interest in that. And that is leading us to the possibility of creating an ideal certification or badge that faculty and staff can have as a recognition that they've gone through this certain level of training. And it won't just be one training. So it would be a series of trainings that we're working on for them to be able to qualify, similar to the idea of allyship, so ideal allies. We're also investigating and currently using already some assessment. So intercultural development inventory is one that is being used. It's known as IDI. And BEVI, which is the beliefs, events, and values inventory. I'm going backwards instead of forward. So the We Support Black Engineers campaign, that campaign came at a very fragile time for our institution and for our country. As we know, this summer we experienced a series, and not just this summer, I will say this summer, I feel heightened the attention to a series of unfortunate, tragic, fatal events that honestly have been going on in our country for well over hundreds of years. And with the murders of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and many others, we definitely wanted to make sure that our community of students felt heard and felt supported, not just due to those instances, but also because of the known challenges that our students of color face. And so we started with this campaign and hope to expand for other cultural groups to develop campaigns that resonate with them and their cultural background that has meaning to them. And so I wanted to just share a little more about why it was celebrated. And I won't read all of this to you, but I just wanted to post this here, is that in addition to what I mentioned, the campaign pays homage to the civil rights movement. And there was a movement during that time that produced this historical imagery that I will show here shortly. I am a man. And that was a part of the Memphis sanitation strike of 1968. And what a lot of people, when they think of civil rights movement, or if they're not as familiar, they might be as familiar with Martin Luther King. And Dr. King was a critical component of the civil rights movement. I mean, he was very influential. What a lot of people don't know, though, is that the Memphis sanitation strike of 1968 was the last protest demonstration that he participated in before his assassination. And so these images that you're seeing kind of sparked some of the images that, well, did not kind of, but they did spark the inspiration for what you'll see from the We Support Black Engineers campaign. And, I realize that for some, these images may be very sensitive or triggering. And so I apologize for not saying that before showing them. But I do have a few more images to show, and I wanted to say that now, because this campaign draws a lot of parallels to what we're seeing today with the Black Lives Matter movement. And the unfortunate truth is that a lot hasn't changed since 1968, and prior to 1968, a lot hadn't changed at that point either. And so for the remaining of the time that we have, I would love to talk about diversity from a different perspective. I would love to talk about it from the perspective of this campaign, and as it relates to the students within the College of Aeronautics and Astronautics that participated, and also from a collaborative standpoint and having a cultural conversation about what we can do to make sure that our students feel supported, welcomed, and included. And that is a team effort. It's not the responsibility of one sole individual. Diversity is a team sport, and everyone has to get in the game and play. Unfortunately, this isn't one of those where we only have people on the bench, like everybody gets playing time in this effort. And so we definitely need to talk about these things more so that we can understand your perspective, so that we can hear from the experiences of the students that are going through these things, whether they're positive or negative, and so we can learn and grow from them. And so I've invited a few students to participate. But before I do that, I want to show the intro video that sparked attention to this campaign and what we're trying to do. And so we tested this earlier, and the sound is supposed to work. So if you don't hear it for whatever reason, if someone can just signal and let me know.
I teach and support Black engineers.
I support Black engineers.
I value Black engineers.
I teach Black engineers.
I want to learn from Black engineers.
I advise Black engineers.
I study with Black engineers on a day-to-day basis.
I learn from Black engineers.
I work with Black engineers in my research group.
I teach Black engineers.
I value
Black engineers.
I mentor engineers, many of which are Black.
I teach Black engineers.
I support Black engineers.
I work with Black engineers.
I support Black engineers.
I'm proud to advise Black engineers.
I teach Black engineers.
In our school, we support Black engineers.
We need 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 Black engineers. We need more Black engineers. We need many more Black engineers.
And so for sake of time, I know one of my panelists has another commitment that she has to attend. And so I'm going to show her video first so that she has an opportunity to react to it and answer any questions anyone may have about her experience. So I would like to introduce Adrienne Guyton, who is on the session with us tonight. And Adrienne, I will play your video first, and then give you a chance to respond to it. So we'll come back to Tasha as time allows.
I'm Adrienne Guyton. I study multidisciplinary engineering with a concentration in biomechanics, and I am a Black engineer. My experience in Purdue Engineering has been nothing short of an emotional roller coaster. And in the future, I would really like to see more support outside of NSBE, which is a self-made space for us, and also the Minority Engineering Program. Being a Black student in higher education is defiance, and it brings me joy because I know there are plenty of people that haven't been in this situation. There are plenty of people that will never be in this situation that don't have access to the kind of education that I can receive. Being an engineer, being a Black engineer at Purdue is nothing short of a blessing because I can show young girls back at home that there's more to life than Fort Wayne. There's more to life than sports. There's more to life than what you look like, what you're wearing, what you can do for someone else. We can go out and we can make lives for ourselves. We can be those people that are changing the world. We can be those innovators. We can be, those people that are making ways out of no way, that are literally paving the way for other people. Like, being a Black engineer means everything because I can show my little cousin, I can show my girls at home that we can be in places that we've never seen ourselves. It's so frustrating to feel like you literally have to prove your entire existence. You have to prove your capability 24/7, 25/8, because everywhere you go, you're being questioned. Everywhere you go, they're looking down on you. Everywhere they go, you have to prove every time you open your mouth that you deserve to be in that space. And it's the most difficult thing in the world, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Because I knew people sacrificed to get me to be here where I am, and I'm not gonna let them down. A total mental shift, like an entire shift in how we're viewed at Purdue on campus. Not just our teachers, not just the people who are educating us, but also the other students that attend the school. It's one thing to have your teacher question like your own intelligence, and that has its own frustrations. But when your classmates don't want to work with you because they think that you're not smart or that you don't have anything to offer, that does something to your mental. And honestly, I feel like that has to shift in order for me to tell people that, Purdue is a great place to study. It is a wonderful place to study, but it's so hard because of those situations. And if you're not mentally there, if you're not mentally tough, you're not going to make it. And I'm completely honest with every student that I come in contact with that this is no walk in the park because of those types of situations. So I feel like there has to be a total societal change in the way that our Black engineers are viewed on this campus. Overall, I would like to see better preparement as far as different trainings or different cultural learnings for students, faculty, and staff. That way they can understand the different students that they're working with and the different backgrounds that they have and how that may impact their learning in the classroom situation. I feel like I've gained the most support from the Minority Engineering Program at Purdue. They have been nothing short of a family to me. Whenever I need any help, whether it's 7 in the morning or 10 at night, I know that I can call someone in that office and they're going to be there for me, no matter if it's social, academic, or I just need somebody to listen. They're always there. They always have their doors open, and they do everything that they can to make sure that this is a safe space for us and that we feel supported in every aspect of our lives. The National Society of Black Engineers, or NSBE, has been one of the most influential organizations in my life on this campus. They have given me countless opportunities for professional development, personal growth, and overall leadership opportunities. I've served on the campus level, I've served on the regional level, and it is unlike anything I've ever seen before. Going to my first national convention was mind-blowing. Like, being able to see all of those different engineers that look like me, that come from similar backgrounds as me, they think like me, and they want to see me succeed, that was just out of this world.
So I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment so Adrienne can have the floor. But Adrienne has since graduated from Purdue. She was a December grad. I still can't believe she's gone. But she was also not just instrumental, not her testimonial wasn't just so influential, but she was very instrumental in this process because she was a part of our team in curating this campaign and getting all the stories. And so I really wanted Adrian to have a chance to react. And I also wanted to open up the floor for any questions for Adrian before she has to leave. So Adrian, please introduce yourself and share any immediate reactions you may have.
Yes, so my name is Adrian Gatson. As Dr. Gatson said in my video, I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I was a December grad, thank the Lord. I was so excited. I studied multidisciplinary engineering. Currently I am giving back to those girls that I mentioned in my video. I'm serving as a substitute teacher at my old middle school before I matriculate onto my engineering career. And so looking at the video was first emotional, just because looking back on like that experience and like, reliving some of those things I was talking about, or, specific instances that come to my mind after watching that video is just, it's tough. It is difficult. And it makes me really happy that so many people are tuned into this particular event, and they're trying to, hear more about diversity and inclusion, and, start, having those difficult conversations, having conversations about, just things that people just weren't aware of. There are a lot of situations that we as Black engineers experience that a lot of people just don't have the knowledge of. And so by being here, it makes me very happy that people are taking kind of like, if not their first step, a continuous step in that process, and being an ally and understanding the different plights that we go through. So thank you guys for being here. I feel like my video said a lot as far as my feelings towards my experience at Purdue. I wouldn't change it for the world. I know there are certain things that I had to go through. They taught me certain lessons, but I do understand that it could have been a lot smoother, and hopefully because of these conversations that we're having, it will be a lot smoother for the people coming after me. Because no child should have to, or no person should have to, be in rooms or feel like no one wants to work with them, or feel isolated just because, they don't look like everybody else. And those situations are very real. They happen on more than one occasion, and it's a difficult place to be in. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or anything like that. I don't know how we wanted to facilitate that conversation, but I'm definitely open to anything. Thank you, Dr. Meggs.
Let's see, there's a question from Ryan, and it says, how did your experience at Purdue shape your career and outlook on life going forward? And I would just like to add, would you mind sharing where you're headed to for your engineering career this summer?
Yeah, my experiences at Purdue shaped a lot about my outlook. I definitely would say it challenged me in certain areas. After going through certain things and experiencing certain things, it can either turn you callous, or it can fuel you to incite change. And I definitely am proud that it took the second approach and not the first. There are definitely moments where, walking through campus, I'm like, you know what, it's just me. It's me and my people I have in my corner, and that's it. But understanding that there are people, you just got to find them, that are supportive and helpful in those areas. I definitely say it changed what I value in a company. As far as understanding the culture, seeing how people responded and different companies responded to what happened this past summer specifically. If they're having those trainings, if they're, supporting, if they have different affinity groups and things of that nature, and making sure that their staff feels safe to have conversations like these, and they have the necessary resources that they need in order to, feel safe and work in their optimal potential. So I definitely would also say with being, so the job that I am going to be moving on to, I'll be working at GE Healthcare within their Edison program starting in July. But as of being a substitute teacher currently, I would definitely say it opens my eyes, and I find myself having more personal conversations with the students that I interact with on a day-to-day basis. I did have a long-term position teaching algebra to eighth graders for about 2 months. And so getting to know them on a personal level, asking them what they want to be when they grow up, telling them what I do, and also just opening that door and letting them know that things like this, being an engineer, going to college, it's possible. And that goes not only for our underrepresented students, but also for those that are part of the majority, you know, talking to students and encouraging them and letting them know that they are more than what they see around them has been everything. And I definitely don't think that without the experiences that I had, I would value that, and it would be something that I make part of my everyday process, my everyday walk. So thank you for that. I think, okay, so the other question, in organizing the summit, we were trying to dissect what the cause of the low enrollment of women in undergraduate or underrepresented students is. When growing up and deciding on whether to pursue a degree, what were the biggest attractions and deterrents for you? Yeah, so honestly, when it comes to the biggest attractions, engineering was not my first choice. I actually was not interested in engineering, despite my parents putting me like in engineering camps or trying to get me to like think bigger. I didn't become interested in engineering until my 8th grade year, where Raytheon has a facility here in Fort Wayne. And so they had a Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day. I was able to go, and I thought that the stuff that they were doing was kind of cool. You know, it's more acoustic work that I was able to see. But I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And then in high school, I actually went to a private school. So once I hit my freshman year, my parents took me out of public school, put me in a private school. And having different teachers telling me like, hey, you know, you're good at math and science, you should look into engineering. I still was hesitant just because the different college trips that I went on, I was like, there's not a lot of interaction here. Like I went and visited schools like RIT. I went and saw, I think, Ohio State and a couple other smaller schools. And I was like, there's not a lot of interaction. There's not a lot of people that look like me. This is not looking like a place where I would want to root myself, because I think that I would be miserable, quite honestly. And it wasn't until I went on a visit to Purdue, I went to a minority engineering, I believe Preview. I came to a couple of MEP programs, but Preview was the most influential. It was like an overnight program. And it changed it literally changed my entire perception of engineering, because I was able to see current students from the minority engineering program, see what they were doing, ask them questions, how, you know, they navigated, and being able to see the familial interactions that they had. I was like, okay, this is a legit family. You know, they're not fronting to say like, yo, you know, we want more diversity and inclusion, but there was a walk behind their talk. And I think that was the biggest attraction for me. Aside from thinking that like academically I could succeed, the big determining factor was making sure that I felt safe and comfortable. When it comes to deterrence, there are definitely times where I didn't want to continue with engineering. I think I got to the point where I was like, well, I came too far to stop now. And so that was a motivating force for a little while. But when I think the bigger deterrents for me were realizing that without having someone in my class that I knew, so someone else from MEP, I didn't want to go to class. There were definitely times where I would like text my friend and I'm like, hey, like, are you gonna be in class today? And they're like, no, like I'm sick or I have an appointment or something like that. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm gonna go because I don't know who I'm gonna work with. And it was my classes like dynamics, statics, you know, where I'm sitting in these, you know, large classes with other people, and collaboration is important. And so having situations where I felt like an outsider were definitely some of the bigger deterrents. But being ingrained in MEP and NSBE is what allowed me to continue, because most times I could find at least one person where I'm like, okay, it's like an unwritten rule, like, we got each other, I'm gonna be working with you, I'm safe. And so that's kind of like a deterrent and an attraction to keep going, I would say. As far as attracting more people, it's all about representation. If I don't see anyone that looks like me, if I can't speak to someone from a similar background and hear their stories, hear their success, I don't think it's possible. And I think that's true for a lot of people. Until you see someone that is similar to you, a lot of things, a lot of spaces you don't think that you can get into those spaces. You don't think you can get into those areas. And so increasing representation, I think in order to do that, I think we need to just give more platform to the people that we already have, and I think that was one of the bigger reasons why I was so in love with this project, is because it's like, we have all these students here, they have stories, they have things that they need to tell, both positive and negative. Why don't we give them the opportunity and the space to share those things? And so by being able to share those, by having those different videos on social media, I've been reposting them. And the girls and the kids that I know back in Fort Wayne, the middle schoolers that find me on social media and follow me, they see these videos and they're like, wow, like, so you do this. And like, they're sharing it with their friends and they're saying like, wow, like, okay, so what does engineering really mean? Like, what are different jobs that I can have with being an engineer? Like, am I going to be locked into a room all day? And things like that. So I definitely think the first step is just allowing us to have these platforms to share these stories, to say, hey, we're here and we're making changes, we're making differences, and we're going to places where you can be too. I think that would be kind of like the biggest first step as far as attracting more people.
So thank you so much, Adrienne. I want to be mindful of your time. I know you have to leave. And if the event organizers don't mind, if there are other questions for Adrienne, we can definitely get them to you. But thank you so much. And we're so proud of you. And thank you for making the time as a graduate to come back and share your experience with us. So thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you all so much. I hope you guys have a great night.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to some of the other students who are on the call. And I definitely want to pick the conversation back up with another student who's here that's actually in the department. So let me share my screen again. And I will play their video. So as I mentioned before, diversity is a team sport and everyone has to get involved. And I met Arlie through this campaign, and she came in support of another student from the Aeroastro school, and actually led for me to be speaking with you tonight. And so I really appreciated Arlie supporting this campaign. And I wanted to share her perspective and give her an opportunity to talk about her viewpoints on diversity within the school and within the college as a whole.
My name is Arlie Black. I am a PhD student in Aeronautics and Astronautics, and I value Black engineers. At Purdue, I think that we are definitely seeing more diversity, but I think Purdue needs to do a bit of a better job. From my experiences during my undergrad, I noticed back in Canada that I went to a really whitewashed school, and I did not see too much diversity. Coming to America, I expected to see way more diversity, and it's improved, but not nearly as much as I expect. Purdue is really well known internationally and has a ton of international students, but within their own communities, within America, I'm not seeing too much of the diversity that I had expected. I was a surf graduate assistant last year, and I noticed that From within the external students that Purdue invited, they had a Pathways Fellowship, and so they invited a whole bunch of students, diverse students from minority communities, and from my experience working with those external students, they put in way more effort because they were much more appreciative of being here than the Purdue students who had just expected to be given that opportunity. So from my experience, when you offer students who haven't had those opportunities the experience to be at Purdue and to learn from the Purdue's professors and to be involved with the Purdue resources, they take much more advantage of it and are appreciative of it, rather than students who, like myself, have been born into privilege and kind of take these experiences for granted. Engineering is all about innovation, and a lot of innovation is based on your own personal experiences. So you're going to make changes based on what you've seen in your own life and what you see is lacking. And so if you only hire people from one background or one set of experiences, then you're only going to get innovation in a certain area. And I think it's really important to broaden your horizons in that aspect, because again, engineering is about innovation, and you want something different. You want people who will see things from a different perspective. So you need to hire people from different backgrounds. With my involvement with the Aerospace Graduate Women's Gathering, or GWG, we have hosted the Amelia Earhart Aerospace Summit going into the 3rd year now. And this year our main focus is on diversity, both in diverse backgrounds, but also diverse jobs within engineering. And so what we're doing right now is reaching out to the various minority groups within Purdue to see if they have any recommendations for a speaker that they are looking for who wants to be involved and can give their experiences in aerospace from a minority perspective, in the sense that have they experienced discrimination, or has their background helped them in some way to help promote aerospace, and how have their backgrounds allowed them to innovate within those fields that someone from a different background would not be able to do. So we are really pushing to get more diverse speakers this year, women and also minority backgrounds. So that's our goal this year, and we're really looking forward to it.
Thank you. So at this time, I want to introduce Arlie and give Arlie an opportunity to react to her video. And Arlie, thank you again for your participation and even your invitation that led me here tonight. And, I really appreciate you even wanting to participate in the campaign and coming in support of your fellow classmate that was participating as well. So looking back now, we did that almost a year ago this summer. What are your thoughts now looking at that video, and how have you experienced any differences since then?
Yeah, so thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of it, by the way. I do think it's very important as an ally. It's honestly like the least I can do, just to use my voice to promote equality and diversity within the community at Purdue. Yeah, so how have things changed? Well, I know at least in my department, they've started listening a lot and taking things really seriously. In fact, the head of the aerospace department has been meeting with minority students, and in fact tonight is meeting with the women students within the aerospace department to actually write down a list of action items, actionable things that they can do to change. So it's not just kind of placating the audience there. He's planning to make physical change. So I think, obviously I'd say the department is constantly thinking about those kinds of things, but the events of the past year have really pushed that forward. So as awful as those events have been, they are serving a purpose, to at least move things forward a little bit and hopefully make some real change instead of just talking about it and then kind of going back to the way things have always been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely Dr. Crosley has been such a joy to work with on the diversity initiatives that he is planning for the school. And I've actually worked with him on a few of those listening sessions, and And I do hope that they have been impactful. I know they've been impactful to him and myself and others that have helped facilitated those. I hope the students feel like they're impactful that have had the opportunity to participate as well. You spoke a little bit about, like the notion of allyship, like from your perspective, why do you think allyship is important as it relates to how we move the needle forward with diversity?
Well, I think everyone's going to speak up for themselves, right? I mean, everyone's always looking out for what's best for you, but if people aren't giving you what's best for you, then you need someone else to speak out and listen, right? If I'm in a position of privilege, just based on the stupid thing of the color of my skin, then why wouldn't I speak out to help other people? It's kind of ridiculous to me that we're still in this position. And so if it's honestly the least I can do to speak up and to say something about, making this a more inclusive environment for other people, then why wouldn't I? And also, as I said in the video, engineering is about innovation. So part of it is just to help the engineering community, right? If you're only drawing from the same well every time, then there's not going to be any more innovation. We really need to invite and welcome diverse perspectives in order to get more technological advancement in engineering and in STEM.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that comment. I'm trying to take a look at the chat and see if there are any questions that anyone may have for Arlie.
Yeah, if there's any questions at the end also, and I'll be sticking around. Oh. Okay, so yeah, Julia asked, what's the most rewarding part of working on AES? So I would say it's the people I get to meet. AES has evolved over the years, so this is the 3rd year, and I've been fortunate enough to work on the committee for all 3 years in various roles. And we've had incredible speakers and participants throughout the summit's existence, and just the networking and the connections and the stories and the backgrounds of the people speaking, and hearing about where people started and where they came from and now where they are. And it just kind of seems like, opportunities are endless within aerospace and, within engineering, within STEM. And it's been really exciting getting to meet so many interesting people and hearing different perspectives. And this summit, like this year's summit alone, we called upon people, not just aerospace engineers, but people with maybe an aerospace degree that decided to do something different, or someone with a completely different degree that maybe found their way into aerospace somehow. And it was really interesting hearing people's their paths and how they got there, and all the amazing things that you could do with aerospace, and how people are working to try to make aerospace more diverse and more welcoming to women and minorities. And so that's been the most rewarding experience for me.
Great, thank you for that question. Thank you for that answer, for sure. So I think for sake of time, we're going to move to the next student. And Arlie, I really appreciate you joining in this capacity tonight. I know you've been operating as a member of the planning committee, but thank you for switching hats for a few moments to share your thoughts and experience. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so I have another student who's on the call with us, and I would like to invite him in his video next. And the next student on with us tonight is Brandon Sales, who is a PhD student. Brandon was one of the first people that I met when I got to Purdue. And an active supporter of MEP and the initiatives that we're doing, and definitely was an important part of this project. And so I'm going to play Brandon's video before he comes to the screen and give his recount of this experience and share his experience here at Purdue as a grad student as well.
I am Brandon Sells, a PhD student in the School of Aeronautics and Astronautics. I am a Black engineer. In the School of Aeronautics and Astronautics, representation is tough. There's not too many of us walking around in the school at the faculty level or the staff level. It would be great to see that representation in that ranks, as well as the graduate student ranks. Undergraduates are there, but they're far and few. We'd like to see more. It means everything. It's my identity, being able to be a part of putting together technologies that can improve people's lives. And yes, you can do that as an engineer, but as a Black engineer, I feel that you bring a perspective that it's holistic in how people can involve themselves with the technology. And we're not just looking at technologies for people that can afford it. In a lot of projects, we have these technology feasibility studies where we say, if this could happen, what's necessary? And we find that there's a lot of capital that needs to be made. But also we understand that for the people that want to use this technology, it needs to be more widespread. And I feel that being able to use that basis to develop technology is important. And I feel that stems from being able to have different people in the room. And so with my research projects, they have, different backgrounds, different ethnicities in the room. And yes, that experience is great. And academically speaking, Purdue does a great job in the School of Aeronautics and Astronautics. I have everything I need. But that representation piece is what keeps me up at night. There's not too many of us walking around. There's not too many of us in the classroom. And that's something that I think Purdue Engineering and the School of Aeronautics and Astronautics could do better. I think that if they want to truly represent the society that we're trying to improve, then I think there needs to be more people that look like the minority in the room. When it comes to using my voice, I'm able to put myself in different rooms. I have access to different committees that I've served on where I have interactions with administration, department heads, and that's great. I'm able to use that as a tool to bring perspective to people that don't have that perspective. Not saying that it's easy work, because again, I'm a graduate student, I'm a PhD student, so that's my first focus. But diversity, inclusion, and equity is something that I'm brought to do. And my voice will continue to be heard. I just want to make sure that the spaces that I'm in, I'm respected there.
So Brandon, thank you so much for being with us tonight, and thank you for sharing your story and coming back to give your thoughts about, what you shared on the video and any extra thoughts that you may have. But again, now looking back on that and things that you've seen happen in the college or the university in a whole, or even in the community, what do you note to be different, if anything, or what are your thoughts at this point?
Everyone, and thanks again, Dr. Gatson, for the platform. The thing that points out to me a year from now from taking that video is that I don't have my Cornell West moment with my hair, so it's a little more tame now. But when it comes to the department, as Arlie was mentioning, the Professor Crosley, the department, he's done leaps and bounds to bring more people to the conversation about diversity and inclusion and equity, and being able to understand what the experience is for students that may not be heard. And that to me has been very impactful, because you would understand that on the face value, you hope that people want to have these conversations to improve the experience, but to have the actions behind it makes a big deal. And in my video, I mentioned that the representation is very slim. in the School of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and to the point where it's been mentioned that even sharing the numbers of the students in aeronautics that are a part of the minority populations would actually identify the students in the group. Like, that's how small the numbers are. And so it's difficult to grapple with that because, again, you expect a department that is so strong in aerospace engineering and so strong in partnerships to attract more students of color. And that's something that I hope, in my fewer times here at Purdue, I hope to improve. I'm looking forward to working with Professor Crosley and others in this effort, and I'm excited for those of us to join in.
Thank you for that. Any questions immediately for Brandon? We'll give a moment if someone wants to pose one in the chat. Brandon, while we're waiting, I have a question for you. I know that you are HBCU grad, and I briefly kind of mentioned, the notion of the college-wide, trying to establish more HBCU connections and intentional partnerships. Do you mind speaking to, like any unique similarities or differences that you might have experienced from your HBCU background as you transition to Purdue?
Sure. So my undergrad, North Carolina A&T State University, does not have an aerospace engineering program. And so they have a mechanical engineering program with a concentration in aerospace. And so you can imagine that some of my electives were swapped out from the mechanical side to the aerospace side. And the biggest difference I would see is the fact that formally trained in aerospace engineering wasn't my background. And so when I came here to Purdue, that transition in my first year, because I did a master's before pursuing a PhD, my first year was very tough because, again, I had the fundamental background of mostly design fluids, which translates well with aerospace, but when it comes to the intricate design of aerospace surfaces and being able to work through the design process took some time. Obviously, coming from an HBCU, the population of students is very different. And so you go from a place where there's a lot of students that look like you to another location where you're one of one. And so that's something that I had to get used to. And I'm so grateful for the Black Graduate Student Association because that was the group that kept me rooted. Having a community is very important. And I think that's the common thread here in this lecture is that we need to make sure that in also increasing the number of students in these populations, we want to also enrich the community and the experience that these students would have. And so if that means there needs to be communities that need to be formed such that the students in these populations know of each other, that can also increase their ability to matriculate through the program. So yeah, that will be my biggest difference.
Thank you. Looks like a question came in the chat. What specific areas do you think Purdue could improve to help URM students? And some of those I know that you touched, but are there any additional thoughts you have related to improvement strategy?
I really think it starts with having the conversation and being able to come to the conversation with an open mind. Typically when we've advertised to have conversations with populations that aren't of the minority, it's faced with, well, this is nice to hear, but maybe we can have this conversation at another time, or we need to think about the entire campus as a whole instead of thinking about these populations. And so I would say Purdue needs to take the same initiative as what's been going on in the College of Engineering departments, with having department heads take time out of their schedule to talk with students about their experience and translating those to action items. I think with the call to action that came from the National Society of Black Engineers is very important, because it gives a conversation starter to something that could be really beneficial for the campus as a whole.
Great, thank you. There's another question from Alice. She wants to add to the question previously. She also wants to know, what can the rest of us in the department, us being students, do to show support?
Thanks, Alice, for the question. And that's pretty simple. You know, being able to have an open mind, being able to set aside notions that aren't rooted in fact, being able to see people as they are and not what they look like, and speaking up when you see an injustice. And that could simply be students being alienated in study groups. It can be as simple as you see a student being able to require assistance but isn't getting the assistance. You can speak up in that. Or it could be as simple as reading up on the differences in cultures for the people that are in your immediate surroundings. The information that you'll learn in those textbooks, in those articles, can go a long way. Because in living through life is about experiences, and the only way to know about others' experiences is actually to learn about others' experiences. So I would start there.
Yeah, I would just thank you for that, Brandon. I would just like to add to that same thought, is that there's a tremendous amount of power in your second thought. You know, if we think about like first impressions, or if we think about something that we may have an aversion to based on one experience, or maybe it's not even a direct experience, maybe it's an indirect experience, you know, just taking the time to not make those assumptions or those biases so prevalent, to actually get to know the individual for the individual. You know, if you think about it, say if you went to you know, a restaurant and you tried a dish and maybe it wasn't that great, you know, but it sounded delicious, you know, you might have an aversion either not to try that again or not to go back. And maybe that person or that chef the day was just having an off day or an off experience. But it's about like, do you give opportunities a second chance? Do you let your first thought take over? Or do you give yourself an opportunity to sit back and observe how this situation, this person, this unique instance might be different? And so I would challenge you all to do that. And, you know, also along that lines, being aware of your own biases. We all have them, you know, we have bias about everything. And so, you know, just being self-aware is a very important first step of what those biases are and how they play out in your classes, how they play out in your interaction with your classmates, how they play out in your interaction with faculty, and vice versa. You know, the biases shape who we are because they are fueled from experiences or our cultural backgrounds or upbringing or geographic, you know, locations, things of that nature. And it's very important that you recognize when you're using that properly or improperly, you know, and how that can affect other people. So just like to add that. For the last few remaining minutes, I did have other videos, but I would encourage you to check out the campaign if some of these videos have sparked interest in learning more about student experiences. We also have a lot of faculty and staff that participated and shared their experiences and commitment to diversity as well. So I would definitely encourage you to spend some time with those. And you can find that campaign by just Googling "We Support Black Engineers Purdue." And I definitely would be happy to answer, you know, any other questions you might have about that, or just diversity initiatives or things that we may be doing in MEP in general. And I hope that, you know, you've gotten a bigger glimpse into what we do, why it's important, and that, you know, it's more than chasing numbers, the numbers are important, but we're trying to make sure that people come and leave whole. And what I mean by that is that, you know, these instances, these experiences, as you've heard, they impact a person in a very deep way. And it's not about intellectual capability. It's about, you know, belonging and feeling welcomed, and anyone who wouldn't, you know, who doesn't feel like they belong or feel welcome is going to impact something else about them. And so we definitely are trying to spread the message that, you know, everyone can get involved, everyone can play a positive role, and everyone can help make a difference. And so definitely happy to answer any questions you may have with the remaining time. Question, what are your thoughts about the police presence on campus and how it affects URM students? And do you think PUPD is necessary? We could spend a whole nother hour talking about that, but I definitely think the notion of police and URM populations can be heightened because of the history of police injustice and police brutality, and the differences of how people of color are treated versus people of the majority. I can tell you anecdotally that the notion of police conversation comes up a lot when parents are talking to us about sending their child to Purdue. Like, is my kid going to be stereotyped, you know, as a person of, you know, poor influence, or, you know, someone who's considered to be a troublemaker just because they wear a hoodie or just because of the color of their skin? That's a question that comes up, unfortunately, more often than not. You know, I definitely think the BIPOC community is very much more so aware of the police presence, but obviously, you know, the whole reason of the police is to protect and serve. We just all hope that they protect and serve in a fair, equitable, and accessible process. And I definitely do think the Purdue University police is necessary. You know, we're here to make sure everyone has a safe campus experience. And, you know, we need that type of law official to help facilitate that and to help, you know, make sure that there's order. But we just want to make sure that it's equitable for all students, and not favors one group over another, or not sees one group as a threat over another. Thank you for your question.
So if there's any more questions, we can get them out to people. But if there aren't any at the moment, I would just like to thank Dr. Gatson again for her time in making this wonderful presentation for us. And I would also like to thank all the participants for coming. So please go ahead and put some more questions in the chat, and we'll keep the Zoom open for a few more minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you for having me, and for those that have stayed on the entire presentation, thank you. I know that you could have just clicked off at any moment, so I appreciate your time and attention. So thank you.